So tonight we're going to be visiting two Queensland cities, Cairns and Brisbane. Even though there's an R in there, you don't pronounce the R. It's Cairns. Cairns and Brisbane. So let's start with Cairns. Located on the tropical northeast coast of Queensland. Can you see it up there on the map? Population 165,000. So it's not a big place. And I've put you up in your special Blue Lagoon villas, so you can. I always take care of my people. That makes them come back. Okay. So what about the climate? The wet season with heavy monsoonal downpours run from November to May. Then a relatively dry season from June to October. Annual rainfall 79 inches. It's up in the tropics up there, 79 inches. Often major flooding. Often a lot of flooding up in the area. It has humid summers, very warm winters. So winter is a good time to actually visit. Maximum temperatures vary from about 80 degrees in July, and remember, July is winter, to 90 in January. So January is summer. So prior to British settlement, as in all of these areas, there were Aboriginal people. This was the Yidinji tribe who was located in this area. And then in the early 1870s, the area became known to the British as Trinity Bay. So that's the bay, and then there's the inlet, and Cairns, the city, will be in that inlet. You know what that is?
Sea cucumber.
Oh, yeah, it says sea cucumber. Yeah. Very good. In the late 1860s, the area became popular with sea cucumber fishermen. And this brought the European presence into the areas. It's apparently something related to like a starfish. So what is it good for? From what I understand, the Chinese take them and dry them and then use them as either a spice or an aphrodisiac or something like that. So there was a trade going on with China, so these sea cucumber fishermen got there. And then on the site, which is today the foreshore of Cairns, there was a large native well, which the Aboriginals used. And some of these fishermen got into a conflict with the Aboriginal people over the well, and it became known as Battle Camp. It's Battle Camp Station. And then in 1876, as there was a need to export gold from this Hodgkinson gold field to the west, so they saw that Trinity Bay was an excellent port. So this made the area very, what we might say, not necessarily a place you were going to inhabit, but a place that would be well to have a port so that you could transport the gold south. In any case, this battle camp was subsequently named Cairns in late 1876 after the governor of Queensland. Whoops, here we go. The governor of Queensland was William Cairns. So they finally decided to get a settlement there, and it was called Cairns rather than Battle Camp. November 1st, 1876, the township was inaugurated at a luncheon given by Captain T.A. Lake on the SS Victoria. There was a big luncheon given there, and this is regarded as the official birth date of the city, November 1st, 1876. Now, when I say city, initially it's quite small. It's still today 165,000. It was basically mangrove swamps and sand ridges. And those had to be cleared. So lots of laborers were brought in, the swamps were cleared, the ridges were, and gradually these were filled with dried mud and sawdust from local sawmills, and then debris from a construction of a railway was used to fill in these areas, and eventually it became an agricultural center. And there's a picture of that agricultural center. Sugarcane, corn, rice, bananas, pineapples. That's what Cairns became known for. And it was very much impacted by Chinese immigrants, most of whom did a lot of the labor as well as developed the agriculture. So there was a basic connection early on between the Chinese, China and in Cairns. And it also served as a port for what they called blackbirding ships that were bringing slaves and indentured laborers to nearby sugar plantations. So it's one of the parts of Cairns history that's not quite so honorable, but it was part of the world at that time. It's hard to believe, slavery, the idea of slavery has been around for a long time. In fact, it was considered normal in just every culture. You look at every culture, there was slavery. The Greeks had slaves, the Romans had slaves, Islam had slaves, the early church had slaves. It wasn't really till late 18th and 19th century it began to be challenged. It was considered the natural order of things. So in any case, that isn't, I'm not trying to defend it, but it is interesting to note that it's been a human institution for a long time. So in 1903, Cairns was officially declared a town with a population of 3,000. And then in 1906, a wharf was finally built. And that's a picture from that time. See the ship out in the harbor. And then by 1911, Abbott Street had become the main corridor in the town. By this time, they had a good water supply, so the town was slowly growing. In 1927, it was hit by a major cyclone, Cyclone Willis. And cyclones would continue to be a constant threat to the area, sort of like Florida and hurricanes. It's a continual threat, and periodically you'll get a major cyclone coming in. Fall of Singapore, 1942, precipitated a mass evacuation of the city. Over 3/4 of the city left. There was a fear of a Japanese invasion. So the population was greatly reduced, and it looked like Cairns was perhaps to go under. But after the war, it began to develop, and actually I should mention it was also the staging ground for this great battle, the Battle of the Coral Sea. Well, all the Allied forces were staging in Cairns. But after the war, the city recovered, and by the late 20th century, had become a center of international tourism. And that's what's really become the major economic boom for Cairns. And it was helped by this in 1984. You didn't have to fly into Sydney or Melbourne. You could fly straight into Cairns as an international airport. And it, over time, developed into a metropolitan city. People go there because of the tropical climate, if you're there during the right time, and the drop-off spots, which we'll visit, especially the Great Barrier Reef. But we'll go there in a bit. So, I'm going to start a bit of a tour, and we're going to look at some of the classical buildings. This is called the Bolins Center. It's a reinforced concrete former department store erected in 1912 for one Michael Boland. He was an Irish immigrant who'd migrated to Australia in 1881, and he became the leading merchant in Cairns. So this was one of the early department stores. Over time, it was bought out by another major department store in Australia called David Jones, which was sort of, what would that be compared to, Bullock's or something like that, a major department store. But then in the early part of the last part of the century, it was no longer a department store, but like a lot of these buildings, they bring in small boutique shops on one level, offices on another. Department stores were really starting, and today, how many department stores will be around in the next 5 years? Not many. Now, this is a building which is on the heritage list, and my wife said, "Why is that on the heritage list?" Well, it's St. Monica's High School, which was a Catholic girls' school under the directions of the Sisters of Mercy. The reason this was considered at the time modern. Most of the buildings, if you see, are much more classical in design. If we go back here like that, this was considered the introduction of modern. And what's characterized by it are its horizontal lines. You notice it's horizontal lines, and also nothing on the building. It's just the plain building. So this was one of the early examples of the modern style of architecture. So it became a heritage building. No ornament. Constructed of reinforced concrete throughout. Then there was the Central Hotel, erected in 1909. Builder was Mr. William Phillips. Comprised a bar, parlors on the ground floor, an expansive veranda, a dining room on the right. Can you see the dining room on the right? Kitchen, sitting rooms, 27 guest bedrooms, and accommodation for the staff. So it was the building. It was sort of the center. What is it today? That's what happens to all these buildings, right? Turned into sort of a shopping mall. And you can see it's still, that dome up there was part of the original dining room. So they've kept that and worked around it. 17 ground floor shops, an entertainment facility, and bars and lounges. So yeah, that's what's happening with all of these old buildings. They're turned into arcades or for consumerism. This is a really nice part of it's called the Esplanade. It's a 2.5 kilometer stretch on the foreshore in the heart of the city. Just take your time, stroll. There are parklands, playgrounds, recreational facilities, and they're all free. And it has its night markets. See, and it's still pretty warm in the evening, in Canada, really, the whole year round. So a lot of people do their shopping in the evening, and they have these famous night markets. And then there's this famous market. It's known as Rusty's Market. Every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, tourists and locals come in to get the fresh, locally grown produce. The farmers actually come in and sell their own produce. So I guess it would be somewhat equivalent to farmers market, right? And it's a magnificent market. And it has Chinese, Indian, Italian, Papua New Guinea farmers all selling their own products. And you can also get some Aboriginal fare. Anyone know what that is? It's called a witchetty grub. It's called a witchetty grub. Very high in protein, by the way. What is it? It's a large white wood-eating larvae of several moths which feed on the roots of the witchberry bush. So that's where it gets its name.
Is it served raw? Raw, live?
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
I mean, live.
Is it live? I don't know if it's live. I didn't eat any. But, I was told by people who did it was really quite good. Sometimes just the look of something turns you off. But if you actually bother to taste it, you might be ordering them online. But the Aboriginals ate this widespread throughout the Northern Territory. It's a basic food chain. And then there's all sorts of other things that you can get at the market. The market becomes sort of a social gathering place. Now this is worth seeing. These are the botanical gardens in Cairns. They're very tranquil spots. You can just walk around, explore the beauty of these various plants, all different kinds of gardens and water with bridges. And you can really see some interesting tropical plants that you've probably never seen before. So yeah, this would be a definite place to go if you just want to relax. Just walk through the garden, see the tropical plants. Oh yeah, look at those.
Oh, that looks like a corpse flower on the left.
What's it called?
Corpse flower.
Corpse flower?
When it blooms, it smells like a corpse.
Okay.
It doesn't bloom very often.
No,
No.
every few years.
Every few years. And then does the plant die once it blooms?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another interesting place to visit is this Doongal Art Gallery, just for Aboriginal art. It's in the center of the city. And just give you some examples of. There are two of my favorites. Now these are contemporary artists here. But if you look at the traditional art, you can see that they use very similar sorts of structure and pattern with a bit of modern twist. I gotta go over here for a moment, Jerry. See, like these little circles here. These are up there. You find those in traditional Aboriginal art, and you get all these lines. You also find that. These are a little finer than you see in the traditional. There's more of the traditional. But do you see the similarity? So if you like Aboriginal art, Cairns and Brisbane are places to really find good art. If you're interested in military history, there's a military museum located in Cairns. It's dedicated to the collection, restoration, and display of armored vehicles from the 1800s to the present day. Anyone like to gamble? There's a major casino on the left. It's a Reef Hotel casino. Can you see all the poker machines in the bottom one? Yeah, it's very, I think I've mentioned it before. Every town and city, if they could, would have a casino. If they can't have a casino, they'll have all these machines in their local clubs. So, yeah. Okay, people go to Cairns not to visit Cairns. I'm just but they go to visit 3 spots outside of Cairns, and that's what we're going to look at. The Chillago Caves, the Daintree Rainforest, and of course, the Great Barrier Reef. So these are the Chillago Caves. They're 85 miles from Cairns, so it takes a little while to get there. Scientists believe the landscape around Chillagoe began to form 400 million years ago, when limestone was deposited and a calcium carbonate sort of mud filled what was once a shallow seabed. And then over time, there was tilting, folding, erosion, and these limestone towers remained, and within them, some magnificent caves. Some of which are decorated. Do you know what we call these things? Remember, in the school, when stalactite and stalagmite. Yeah. It's also known for its bats. It's bats. And this famous bird, the white-rumped swiftlet. How many people are interested in the white-rumped swiftlet? Any birders here? Yeah. It's very rare. It's 4.5 inches long. It's not big. With a wingspan of 4 inches and a weight of 45 ounces. So it's a small bird. And it has a very high-pitched call when it flies. There are also lots of these. Lots of pythons and spiders. And Aboriginal rock art. Well, you can imagine the caves. Yeah, this was a prime spot for the Aboriginal artists to do their work. Okay, the Daintree Rainforest, 65 miles north of Cairns, 460 square miles. It's part of the largest continuous area of tropical rainforest on the continent. Now, you might not believe this, but they now have found that this rainforest at one time, and I'm talking about millions of years ago, covered basically the whole continent. But nearly the whole continent was rainforest at one time. Then because of climate change or whatever, it's sort of like the Sahara. You know, the Sahara at one time was forested. So in the middle of Australia now, it's desert. But yeah, this is what remains of that rainforest. But about 120 million years ago, most of the continent was rainforest. It was named by, here's some views in it, walking paths. And just beautiful area. And it was named after Richard Daintree, who was a geologist and photographer, 1832 to 1878. The rainforest contains 30% of the frog, reptile, and marsupial species of Australia.
What is that on the right? What animal is that?
I think it might be a wombat. I'm not sure. I think it might be a well-fed wombat. It also has 90% of Australia's bat and butterfly species. 90%. 7% of the bird species in the country can be found. Look at this guy over here on the far right. It looks like an emu, but it's blue feathered, and I'm not sure what. Has anyone ever been around an emu? Don't they have some emu farms somewhere? Up by Solvang, yeah. Those guys, just don't get near them with your food. Yeah, they'll come after you. Yeah, there are a lot of emus just outside of Canberra. So we used to go out there and have picnics, and then the emus would start coming. It also has 12,000 species of insects. Look at those. Look at those.
Is that blue butterflies? Brazil, blue butterfly. Looks like a beetle.
Yeah, the one on the upper right is a butterfly. The left and the bottom. Chris said she had seen something about the one on the bottom, and it had a special name, but I couldn't find it.
It looks like a dragonfly.
It looks like a dragonfly, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah, so like I said, 12,000 species of insects just in that forest. 12,000. Okay. The Great Barrier Reef. It's the world's largest coral reef system, composed of 2,900 individual reefs and 900 islands, stretching 1,400 miles over an area of 133,000 square miles. It's located in the Coral Sea and separated from the coast by a channel, which you can see, which is 100 miles wide and 200 feet deep. It was selected as a World Heritage Site in 1981.
There was a starfish that was endangered too.
Yeah, it's there. Yeah, I've got a picture of that guy down the line. Yeah, but it's made up of these coral polyps.
You don't want to fall on them.
No, they're
Long,
yeah.
kids would ride bicycles and they'd get cuts and it wouldn't heal because it's like a live.
Yeah. You don't want to fall on these things. But here's some of the marine life you can see. Just amazing marine life. Isn't the variety of life amazing?
Yeah.
When you just look at
Looks like the clown.
it is a clownfish. It's a clownfish. Yeah, it is a clownfish.
And the sea star.
Sea
They're
star.
all different colors.
Yeah. Lionfish.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what that guy on the right is. But the way you can see these things is they have glass bottom boats, which you can go out in, and there's a better example. So you can look at what's beneath the surface. And if you're into it, you can do snorkeling as well, yeah, or scuba diving, yeah. But as you mentioned, here's the enemy.
Yeah.
This is known as the crown of thorns starfish. It eats coral. It eats coral. What they cyclically, these things, there's a population outbreak of these things. So it's been estimated that the reef has lost more than half of its cover of coral since 1985. And so there's climate change, there's tourism, there's this guy, and there's been a big reduction.
There isn't an actual enemy for it, is there?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
That's why.
Yeah. Where it came from, I'm not sure. Okay, so that's Cairns. Now we're going to go 900 miles south to Brisbane, capital city of Queensland. Beautiful city, beautiful city. It's the third most populous city in Australia, 2.6 million, and it's located about 9 miles from Moreton Bay. So the city comes down that inlet. The bay, see where it says Moreton Bay? So the city's about 8 miles from there down that inlet. It's a very diverse city, 32% of its population being foreign-born. And it's frequently ranked high in the list of the most livable cities in the world. Except when you get a cyclone. We'll put you up in the Emporium Hotel. Mainly because it's got this wonderful 5-star restaurant and a real nice view of the city. Okay, in terms of climate, it's humid subtropical. Humid subtropical. Hot, wet summers, moderately dry, warm winters. 80% of summer days average between 80 and 90 degrees. So it's warm there most of the year. Winters are short. Even in the winter, the average temperature is 72. So it's warm. Annual precipitation, 45 inches. Periodically, it gets floods. This was, you may remember, 3 years ago, major flood in Brisbane. That's the 2022 flood. My friends live on a ground that's a bit higher than that so that they weren't affected. But much of the city was underwater for quite a while. And then you may remember last year, Cyclone Alfred, which didn't turn out to be quite as bad as they initially thought. When they saw it coming, they were saying this could be one of these, major cyclones, but it veered off just at the last moment. But this is veering off. There was a lot of rain, quite a bit of damage in the city. So it is known for its periodic flooding and tropical cyclones. And again, Aboriginal people inhabited what is now the Brisbane area for at least 22,000 years. So they were there a long time. It's estimated that there were about 6,000 to 10,000 Aboriginal people in the area when the first European settlement took place in about the 1820s. Archaeological evidence suggests there was frequent habitation near the Brisbane River at a place called Musgrove Park. So this was, they believe, one of the sacred grounds for the Aboriginal people, where they would do a lot of their initiation rites. The Aboriginal people were very much into initiating the youth. So they would take them out in initiation rites, usually at dark, and then they would do these quite scary dances of the dream time. The idea was you had to take these little kids who were used to everything being okay and wonderful into adult life. It was sort of, and I don't know what therapists think about this, but it was kind of shock treatment. You take them out one night and you let them, you initiate them. Now the elders are there to protect you. That's all part of it. But you're initiated into adult life. And it's believed that this was one of these initiation sites. And today there's a cultural center there for the Aboriginal people. So, Matthew Flinders was initially explored the area. On July 17th, 1799, he landed at what is now known as Woody Point on the right, which he named Red Cliff Point because from out at sea, the cliffs looked red. And in 1823, the governor of New South Wales, Thomas Brisbane, on the left, gave instructions for the development of a new penal settlement for convicts. And he sent a party with this man, John Oxley, to explore the area. And Oxley recommended that Woody Point or Red Cliff Point was a great place for the new colony, because ships could land there easily at any tide, there wasn't any problem. And so a settlement party landed September 13th, 1824, establishing Moreton Bay Penal Settlement. It was a prison. This would later become Brisbane, but that's where its origins were, in a penal settlement. And it flourished under this man, Captain Patrick Logan. The number of convicts during his time increased from 200 to over 1,000. And he developed substantial settlement, brick buildings, school, hospital, and he became famous for his extreme use of the object on the right. Does anyone know what that's called? Cat o' nine tails. And it wasn't used to scratch your back. Well, it was, in a way of speaking. So, yeah. I don't know about you guys, but when I was in junior high, I still got paddled. It wasn't uncommon, back even in the 50s. My PE teacher had a paddle called a waffle with the holes in it. If you were late after getting dressed, you bent over and he whacked you. Couldn't do that today, which is probably a good thing. But it was that notion that punishment was what kept the prisoners in line. In any case, between 1824 and 1842, about 2,400 men and 145 women were detained at this Moreton Bay settlement.
Where did the prisoners come from?
They were coming up from New South Wales and from other places, South Melbourne. They wanted to get, probably from Sydney. They needed to expand the prison system. It was getting overloaded because you were still getting people sent over from England, still coming from England. And this was the first a drawing of the first settlement, non-convict settlement, and that was in 1838. So non-convicts started to move into the area because it was quite fertile land, and it wasn't long before the free settlers outstripped the convicts. And then in 1840, this gentleman began to actually make a plan of the town, and one of the first buildings was St. Stephen's Church. We'll see this shortly in our tour, but this was in 1850. In 1859, Queensland separated from New South Wales. This is when it became a separate state. And Sir George Ferguson Bowen became the first governor of Queensland and selected Brisbane as the capital. So that's when Brisbane becomes the capital of Queensland. Queensland becomes a separate state. Okay, there was Victoria, there was New South Wales, and in what they, when I was there, they called it the deep north, was Queensland, and you'll see why in a moment. But then he hired this architect, Charles Tiffin, and he was appointed government architect, and he effectively designed the city with its numerous buildings, and we'll see some of these during the tour. 1864, there was a major fire, burned through the central city, consumed 50 houses, 2 banks, 3 hotels, and numerous businesses. It's because a lot of the houses were made of wood. Following the fire, in rebuilding, they used more brick. Brick was very much used in Australia for quite a long time. I remember flying in the first time over Sydney, and you look down, the city looks red because it's nearly all brick. Okay? Our original house was made of brick. So I think the one I showed you last week. When we went by, they plastered it over. Anyways, styles change, I know. Okay, so following it, most of the town was now built of brick and stone. But interestingly, they didn't have a fire brigade until 1881. We think of these older cities, they didn't have fire brigades. If there was a fire, there was sort of a community group that would get together, grab your bucket, and go out and fight the fire. And
In Philadelphia, and if you were a member of that brigade, they go right to
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You had to be a member of the brigade, or you didn't get taken care of. Yeah, yeah. So that finally happened in 1881, and so during the 80s there was this period of economic prosperity. There was a construction boom, lots of buildings. For example, the Treasury Building was built in 1883. So this is interesting. Following World War I, there was a conflict between returned servicemen of the 1st Australian Imperial Force who'd come back and socialists that the servicemen thought were disloyal to Australia. And between 1919 and 18, there was a series of very violent demonstrations known as the Red Flag Riots. So it was this notion that we had fought for our country and you're trying to undermine our country, that nationalistic spirit. During World War II, oh, look who's there. It became the central city for the Allied campaign. It was the furthest north in Australia, which had adequate communication facilities. And this AMP building was initially used as headquarters for American forces under General MacArthur. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there were over 1 million U.S. troops passed through Australia during the war. 1 million. And in 1942, Brisbane was the site of a violent clash, I think I mentioned this last week, between U.S. military personnel and Australia servicemen and civilians, which it resulted in a number of injuries. It was later titled the Battle of Brisbane. And what were the factors that led to it? Well, there was a lot of, first of all, the Americans had better rations. They also, the shops and the hotels gave them preferential treatment because they had more money. And then there was this American custom of caressing girls in public, which was seen as offensive to Australian morals of the day. Well, those changed, I'll tell you that. Those changed. But this was still, this was you're back in the 40s, and this was seen. And so the tensions rose between the two groups, and they fought in the streets for on a number of occasions, significantly enough to call it the Battle of Brisbane. So this is why Queensland was referred to as the Deep North, because of this individual, Jelke Peterson. He was the governor of Queensland from 1968 to 1987. And he was very socially conservative, and his regime was known for police corruption and brutal suppression of protest. Now, if you remember the 60s, the late 60s, yeah, so he put it down with an iron hand. And even when I was there, because we went down in 81, people in New South Wales and Victoria thought of it as a type of police state. He ran it that way. This eventually led to an inquiry. It got so bad. It called the Fitzgerald Inquiry into crime and corruption in the Queensland government. It resulted in Peterson's resignation and the jailing of 3 former ministers and the police commissioner. I have read, however, just recently there's been a move by conservatives that show that these guys were really mistreated. Looking back, you can always, depending on who's in power and what the feeling of the time is, you can recreate history, if you will. And that's starting to go on now. Anyway, so Brisbane hosted the 1982 Commonwealth Games, as well as the World Expo 88. And you can see the Queen was there. So these events, accompanied by a scale of public expenditure and construction not seen before in Queensland, made the city boom. And the 21st century has seen population growth the highest of any Australian capital cities, with major infrastructure development. These were all infrastructure projects that took place during that time. In case you're interested, Brisbane will host the 2032 Summer Olympics. So get your tickets. Get your tickets now. Okay, so let's take a little tour of the city. The best way to see it is something, it's called the City Cat. It's these little boats, hop on, hop off terminals. So you can take the boat, hop off. A lot of cities have these with buses, right? If you go to Europe, the hop on, hop off bus. Well, you can do this along the Brisbane River. Number of buildings worth seeing, if you like buildings. First, there's Old Government House. This was constructed to accommodate Queensland's first governor, Sir George Bowen, who I mentioned, and his family. 2-story, designed in 1860 by Charles Tiffin, the architect, in what was called the Classical Revival style. You can see the classical art tends to be more horizontal. Then there was Old St. Stephen's Church, which I mentioned earlier. It was also known as Pugin Chapel, in its heritage-listed Roman Catholic church, designed between 1848 and 1850. But as the Catholic community began to grow, Old St. Stephen's became a cathedral. But its capacity, as you can probably see, was fairly limited. So on December 26, 1863, Bishop James Quinn laid the foundation stone for a new cathedral. I like this because you see the old... Yeah. You say, well, what was done with that? Well, it was used as a school by the Christian Brothers, initially a major... Christian Brothers are major Catholic priesthood that runs schools throughout Australia. But then it was later, when the cathedral was finally became, it was named a chapel. So it's the local chapel for the cathedral. Then there's Customs House. I think, didn't we visit another Customs houses were very, very important buildings in Australia for the trade. Let's see here. Yeah, it was designed by a Charles H. Maclay. It was built between 1886 and 1889. There had been an earlier building there, so that was knocked down and it was replaced by in this manner. And there wasn't much manufacturing in Queensland at the time, so there was a lot of things coming in, and customs had to be paid because most of the things you were getting were being brought in. So, and it really became a center of economic activity. It was in the 1988 renovated. It's not a customs house anymore. It's a function venue. So if you want to get married, that's a good spot. Nice spot. It also has a very nice restaurant with a view of the bridge. Then there's the City Hall. This is a really magnificent building. Doesn't that remind you of Greek? I mean, you think of Greek architecture, the classical architecture in front, but then the tower in the back. It's sort of a mixture of classical and Gothic, which I think is really cool. Its foundation stone was laid February 3rd, 1971 by the governor at the time, and we actually have a picture of that. The foundation stone was placed facing what was Albert Square. It's now known as King George Square. And it had a hollowed time capsule was placed within it. Sort of, so in a couple, well, somewhere down the line, if you want to see what was significant at the time, you can dig up the capsule. If you're kind of adventurous, oops, here's the interior, sorry. And on the top floor is a museum. This is a cool museum. It's a museum of the city. It's called The River. So it traces all the history that we've just briefly gone over in great detail. Now, if you're adventurous, you can climb up the top of Story Bridge. You can see the people up top there. Because it has a magnificent view. If you like art, there's the Queensland Cultural Centre. It incorporates the Queensland Art Gallery, the State Library, the Gallery of Modern Art, and the Queensland Theatre Company. So it is a total cultural center. It's not just an art museum. That's only one aspect of it. And it's surrounded by parkland, which you can stroll through, right along the river. So let's look at, here's the art gallery. That looks like one of those big insects we saw. It has its own Aboriginal gallery. Its theater. And its library, all in one big cultural center. So you have the library, you have the theater, you have the museum. It's a magnificent setup. The government really thought this through. Really, really nice. And then this is a neat little walk. It's called the South Bank Arbor Walk. South Bank's on this side, can you see? South Brisbane. On this side of the river is the area called South Bank. And there's this really interesting arbor walk. It's constructed of curling steel columns. Can you see those? The columns that are... and it's a pathway that you walk along the river to various cafes, restaurants, parks. Just a wonderful little stroll. You can stop and have a coffee, or if you like something a little stronger, it's always available. And they're often covered with these bougainvilleas. They're just beautiful. Every major city will have its cricket ground. This is the Brisbane cricket ground, known as the Gabba. Which comes from the suburb Woolloongabba, which was the original name for fighting place. So it's appropriate. It's not actual gladiators, but it's now this is much smaller than, let's say, the MCG or the S. I think this is only 37,000. But it's a wonderful venue. What happens in these days with the sixth grade cricket matches? You go out, you take because it's 6 hours. 6 hours a day. So you go out, you take your basket with you, you take your tinnies, you sit up usually on the hill, and you just have beers and watch this and let time go by and watch a bit of cricket. It's a very slow pace. If you're used to something, it's all sports. Now this is This is interesting. This was an international cricket match. Can you see the stands at all? Is it big enough? Can you see any people? What do you see? You see red and blue. When did this take place? COVID. Do you remember even at our sporting events, they had nobody could go, so they used to put up cardboard faces? Yeah, this was a test match that was played in front of nobody. Yeah.
Did they play soccer there also?
They do play some soccer, but it's mainly a cricket venue. But yeah, COVID seems a long time ago, doesn't it, somehow? But it wasn't that long ago.
I'm so glad to have it open.
Yeah. So that's the GABA. If you like to shop, Linda, there's this famous Queen Street Mall, the famous mall that in Brisbane. 700 stores. So if you are a shopper, you can spend some time at the mall. Okay, like Cairns, Brisbane is also a jumping off point for several other places. These include the Lone Pine Koala Sanctuary, Moreton Island, and then the Gold Coast or Surfers Paradise. This is the Lone Pine Koala Sanctuary. Situated 8 miles north of the city. Opened in 1927. We have a picture there of when it was open. It's the first and largest such sanctuary in the world. It acts as the home for more than 130 koalas, and you don't say koala bear.
No, because they're not there.
They're not a bear, and koala it's a redundancy to say koala bear. So just say, if you say koala bear, they'll automatically know you're an American. Even if you try and put on your Australian accent. That a koala bear, mate? No. In any case, yeah, it's all sorts of marsupials from the area. So it's a wonderful place to visit. It's about 8 miles. It takes not long to get out there. Then there's Moreton Island, which is the world's 3rd largest sand island. 40 miles from the city. Easily accessible. There's a ferry that goes out there. It takes about 75 minutes. It covers an area of 72 square miles. 23 miles from north to south and 8 miles at the widest point. It was named back in 1770 by Captain James Cook. And 95% of the island is actually a national park. It's a very popular destination for camping and whale watching. And again, if you like scuba diving, there's plenty of that. Finally, there's the Gold Coast. It's called Oz's Little Miami. It's located 40 miles southeast of Brisbane. It's about 43 miles of coastline and numerous beaches. It's known for its beaches. And some of the best surfing spots in the world. Surfers Paradise, colloquially known as Surfers, is the central suburb of the city of the Gold Coast. So it's the suburbs part of the city. So it's, some people say, is it the Gold Coast or is it Surfers? Well, Surfers is part of the Gold Coast, just like Hollywood would be part of Los Angeles or something like that. And you can see what it's known for. But the first hotel, 1925. 1925. The Surfers Paradise Hotel. Following that, the region grew significantly, and 30 years later was, actually close to, 30 years was proclaimed a city in 1959. You want to see the hotel today? things change. For many years, this building in the forefront here, the Sands Hotel, was the tallest building at Surfers. We went up there in 1977 for a vacation when Chris's parents came out, and we were on the top floor, and that was the highest point in Surfers. That's what happened to Surfers. And a lot of money came in from Japan. A lot of Japanese investment. And it's become a major tourist destination. In 2007, it became the 6th largest city in Australia. Okay, we're done, but let's stop at the pub. We'll stop at the pub, have it. Now, I've put that can over there because every state in Australia has its own beer. Yeah. If you're in Melbourne, you're going to drink Foster's. We probably know Foster's here. If you're in New South Wales, you drink Tooheys. If you're in Queensland, you drink 4X. If you're in Perth, you drink Swan Lager. So and they all say what? Ours is the best. Ours is the best. Okay, so any questions, thoughts, comments? Next week we'll be going to Adelaide and Perth. Yes?
A lot of your pictures show the sky so clear. Do they have a smog issue?
Initially, well, Melbourne doesn't because do any of these cities have smog issues? Most of them don't have to because they're all on the coast. Have you noticed that? Most of the cities are on the coast. Sydney can get a little polluted once in a while, especially as you move into the western suburbs. But if you're on the bay and you're getting that breeze, it's sort of like here, right? You get that afternoon breeze. Every time I step on the 10th tee, at about 12 o'clock, 9th hole, perfectly clear. Up on the 10th tee, here comes the breeze. Right? So you get that afternoon breeze. So by and large, there hasn't been a real pollution problem in the major cities. Because they're all on the coast, basically. On the east coast, south, and west. Nothing in the middle. Nothing in the middle. Okay, any other thoughts? Okay, good. Thanks for coming.